Good afternoon and morning to those of us on the West Coast. My name is Zina Hazuri. I'm a Capacity Building Assistance Specialist for Hands United, the National Capacity Building Assistance Program here at the Latino Commission on AIDS, and thank you for joining us. HIV and AIDS remain a public health concern in the United States. While great progress has been made in preventing and treating HIV, there is still much for us to do. An estimated 1.1 million people in the United States were living with HIV at the end of 2015. And of those people, about 15%, or 1 in 7, did not know that they had HIV. In 2017, there were 1.17 million cases of chlamydia, 555,608 cases of gonorrhea, and 30,640 cases of syphilis. All these STDs had significant increases in diagnosis compared to the previous year. In 2016, an estimated 2.4 million people in the United States were living with hepatitis C. What we know is that many of the risk behaviors for HIV are the same behaviors that put folks at risk for hepatitis C and STIs. Many HIV testing programs are shifting their programs to provide supplemental testing for STIs and hepatitis C along with their HIV testing efforts. Today, we are lucky to have providers implementing such integration and strategies, and they're here to discuss what they're doing when it comes to their testing programs. So with that said, I would like our panelists to go ahead and introduce themselves. So we'll start off with Dean, who is the CTRS Program Manager at PALS.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Dean Edwards. I am Program Manager over the Counseling, Testing, Referral Services at Palmetto AIDS Life Support Services. I also work with Men's Health. I'm originally from the island of Bermuda. I've been in the United States over 25 years. I've been with PALS 12 years now, and enjoy what I'm doing.
Thank you, Dean. Next, we're going to have Alison Dejan, the Prevention Program Manager.
Hey, good afternoon and morning to everyone on this innovative, technologically savvy webinar webcast that I had trouble figuring out, but I think I've got it now. I'm Alison Dejan. I've been working in HIV prevention in New Orleans for 13 years, since right after Katrina. Started out doing HIV counseling and testing and outreach a whole lot, and then worked at the state on the funding side, and I'm now back at the agency I worked at initially, the No AIDS Task Force, which has become Crescent Care, overseeing programs such as HIV testing, but also rapid STI testing and Hep C testing, and then lab-based STI testing for certain populations, and a syringe service program. So I've been doing a lot of integrating of services, even more so as we've expanded our mission as an organization.
Great, thank you, Alison. And we have Gustavo Morales, who's the Director of Care and Services at the Oasis Wellness Center.
Hi, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sina, and all the other panelists. Yes, my name is Gustavo Morales. I'm originally from Puerto Rico. I've been working on the field for 17 years. Since I was 17 years old or so. But I've been in a lot of different fields. I started as a participant. I was part of the capacity building team of the commission as well. 7 of the 17 years that I've been working were in the United States, and specifically New York City. And I currently oversee the LGBTS Wellness Center that we have in New York City. So I feel that has definitely given me a level of experience going from a participant to a tester and then a manager, which allows to have a better picture and understand a little bit the walk and the talk of the process.
Great, thank you, Gustavo, and welcome to all of our panelists. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump right into our panel discussion. So the first question is, what is the goal of testing integration?
I mean, I'll just jump in. In our case, integrated STI and HIV testing was to have a holistic approach to make sure that we provided more services, but also to satisfy a growing need. It was very, very common that clients came in and said, oh, so this HIV test also covers all these other STIs? And I had to answer no. So that was a cue for us. Okay, we need to integrate more pieces into the work that we're doing, so we allow the services to be given to clients.
And I could say the same for PALS. We started testing in 2010 under the mandate from the CDC that everybody get tested. But since then, we initially started with HIV testing, and a few years back, we integrated STI testing as well. From the need for people not only coming in for the HIV test, but people coming in symptomatic for STDs, kind of requesting just STDs. So we thought let's integrate those services once we got the funding from the health department.
Yeah, and in New Orleans, we've been doing rapid HIV testing, especially with the integration of rapid syphilis and rapid Hep C testing. We've been doing rapid HIV testing forever, and it's like people kind of got tired of just getting an HIV test. So you have this new thing to offer, and it's actually a recruitment tool because people are like, I got tested. Have you gotten tested for Hep C? Oh, you can test me for that. So it's actually breathed new life into testing programs, especially out in the field. I think STI testing, lab-based, has always been a need of community, but with rapid HIV testing, I think people just were like inundated with agencies and people trying to reach them. And so having these other services is a really nice tool for us. And it helps people who need other linkage to care treatment get those services. So it's been wonderful to have more tools in the toolbox.
Exactly.
Great. So you all made note about how it's important, and it has kind of helped you to bring a new client base in and reach folks that you wouldn't have reached with different kinds of tests. Why else is it important to integrate hepatitis C and STI testing with HIV?
In our case specifically in New York City, I would say maybe a year and a half ago, a report came out, a study was done, and it was identified that a reactive or positive result to anal syphilis was a good marker of seroconversion within the next 12 months of someone. So although we just do rapid testing, I wouldn't know necessarily where the syphilis infection came in. That was a cue for us. Okay, so potentially identifying an undiagnosed syphilis infection can definitely prompt me to get someone in PrEP before there's a seroconversion.
Well, for us with hepatitis C, maybe about 4, 5, 6 years ago, we received a little bit of funding to do HIV and Hep C screenings. And we did it with specific populations, so that kind of gave us the impetus to move on and include that in all of our screening. Of course, when we do HIV testing, we have a reactive. We'll do those panels for Hep C and other STDs. But since we received that funding to work with a specific population for HIV and hepatitis C, we moved forward. And then, of course, funding came from our local health department to target hepatitis C from those markers that the CDC put out for those who would recommend to get tested for hepatitis C.
Yeah, we have a pretty robust syringe access program, as well as we're part of the National HIV Behavioral Surveillance site, where we every 3 years study behaviors around HIV risk with people who inject drugs, and have just found a growing hepatitis C epidemic. And so having a hepatitis C test available side by side with an HIV test helps to normalize those other tests as well, because I think we have done a good job as a country to normalize HIV testing, to integrate into routine care, but we still other some of those other conditions. So it helps I think just make us being able to, as prevention folks, offer more. It kind of normalizes just talking about these things. And getting people into care and treatment. But through doing Hep C testing, which is requested by our agency, I think anecdotally, certainly more often than HIV testing for people who inject drugs, we have also identified previously unknown HIV infections. So by having that Hep C test, the thing someone really wanted, we were also able to provide them with an HIV test and get them linked to care, and then deal with both health conditions. So the more the merrier with testing, especially when linkages and next steps are in place.
And if I may add, this speaks a little bit to what Alison said earlier about the fatigue. This is very anecdotal, but when we used to go to do outreach and we talked about HIV testing, a lot of people reacted to already got it done, or I'm holding until I get on PrEP to get it done. And then my question is, when are you going to get on PrEP? And they didn't have a plan to get on PrEP. So they were holding off on getting an HIV test because they were going to get on PrEP, but then they didn't have a plan to get on PrEP. And it prompted me to, okay, I need to offer some of the options that are not attached to what they're usually getting, and that's going to be a little bit more attractive. And hence, now when I hear about, I'm holding on the HIV to get on PrEP, for example, I can talk about, like Alison said, oh, what about HIV, what about Hep C testing, for example? What about syphilis testing? And that then changes the conversation.
So we have folks from all over that are tuning in right now, and some of them are thinking about integrating their programs and adding these other testing options to their HIV testing programs. So what would you say are essential things that an organization or a program needs to consider when they're planning to integrate supplemental testing with their current HIV testing program?
I think funding is clear. Having a funding source to provide funding for the test kits, but then also for the increased sort of burden on staff. So if you're doing 3 rapid tests with a client instead of 1, that's just it's going to be more time per client because you have to explain each test. And then if someone is positive, there's a lot more knowledge that needs to be gathered on what the next steps are. So having funding to support that is great. If you can just get test kits donated from your health department or through, through the test kit companies or however, I think you can integrate it and not, and still have that as a service because it does recruit new populations. But there are certainly, I think, putting aside resources for a more robust testing program is integral to having it sustained. So I would say funding is the biggest thing.
Staff readiness. Make sure that when you move to that area, you want to make sure your staff is fully trained. A lot of times the providers of the kits will come in to do an in-service with your staff. We have done that over the years. Of course, the local health department always has at least 2 or 3 trainings on specific STD testing that they offer. Have key staff. You have to, of course, you have a program manager, you have your testers. Make sure that you would have a lab person, whether it's a phlebotomist or medical assistant or somebody available for whenever you have to do a blood draw. So to me, having the key staff is one of the most important things available because you can't do it all. Small programs, you might have to do it all, but it's best to work towards having key staff in those specific areas.
Yeah, to that I would add, I think it's easy to oversee the most obvious stuff. CLIA waiver, update your CLIA waiver.
Yes.
Without that, everything is mute, right? And
yes.
with the updating of the CLIA waiver, update your protocols, your policies and procedures, manual. Those little things are things that we, especially if we're passionate, we can run with the test and forget about everything else. But then there might be issues. And on that end, for example, also like it was mentioned by Dean, think about the capacity of your staff, think the trainings and retrainings that people need to take. Explaining a HIV reactive result looks very different than explaining a Hep C reactive result.
Mm-hmm.
I could have a Hep C reactive result, and it doesn't mean that I have an acute infection right now, right? So how do I explain those? Because positive doesn't equal positive, or reactive doesn't equal reactive in all the different tests. So making sure that your staff is able to change those scripts on the fly and understand the process is important. And lastly, understand the laws in your state around communicable diseases. In New York City, for example, syphilis is a communicable disease that needs to be reported. But I cannot report. I'm not a physician. I'm not a doctor. Mm-hmm. I would do a disservice if I am doing rapid syphilis testing anywhere. I identify reactives, but I don't have a place or a protocol to make sure that these individuals get to a physician who actually can get treatment and the reporting piece. Because then it's a disservice. So thinking about all those little pieces before you step in is something that I think is critical.
Yeah, and just one more thing. There's slight nuances with like the FDA age approval of each rapid test. So making sure you know that. So what can a 15-year-old do versus an 18-year-old? Because certain tests are approved, and don't quiz me because I don't know off the top of my head which ones are FDA approved for which age group in that sort of 13 to 18-year-old range. And then like things like storage temperature are slightly different. And then the controls, the frequency of running controls and how controls are stored and their temperature range is slightly different. So just making sure right? You're triple checking. If you're doing all 3 of those rapid tests, you got to triple check everything.
Correct. I will also add with your partnerships. We have a partnership with our health department, our lab within our health department, where we send our samples to. We also have the local health department, the county office where they do the DIS and things like that. So I have those relationships because they will call, asking about client information. And then also your community partners who you might make referrals to outside of the local health department. So building those relationships and establishing those MOUs or MOAs is very important.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for all of that insight. And so just based on hearing, it sounds like there's a lot of pre-work that definitely needs to go into the planning once you sit down and make a decision that integrating hepatitis C and STI testing into your HIV testing programs is something that needs to be done. Definitely those policies and procedures, thinking about those different age ranges of the tests and the temperatures, and that's all going to go into the policies and procedures that are going to be created around your testing program or updated around your testing program, right? So continuing this conversation around things that folks can do, what were some challenges, or what challenges have you experienced when you decided to go ahead and integrate your HIV testing program with hepatitis C and STIs testing?
For us, so we've worked really hard to have a program called the Crescent Care Start Initiative, where if someone tests HIV positive, we're linking them to medical services, usually within 24 hours. Because we're now co-located in one building for most of our walk-in testing, we walk someone upstairs and they're seeing a physician, starting medication that same day they're receiving rapid testing. With hepatitis C, depending on so that requires a blood draw to sort of verify if someone needs treatment, and then depending on insurance and if they have Medicaid and level of fibrosis, there's all sorts of barriers to care. And then syphilis is pretty straightforward, except when someone does a rapid syphilis test. In terms of rapid testing, when someone does a rapid syphilis test, if they've actually had syphilis before, then it's tricky because it's not necessarily a new infection. The follow-up, the next steps aren't as straightforward for our organization. And so making sure that all the people doing counseling and testing are aware of that beforehand and commit that to memory and then communicate that effectively to clients is important, so that we don't leave someone feeling like we didn't provide, appropriate services for what they need for next steps, or they misunderstood what the process would be if they were to test positive. So that's what comes to mind over here.
For us, it was key staff. Sometimes you can't afford to employ or contract with a phlebotomist, so we had to seek funding for that service. Also, starting up the program, you have to align your procedures and policies and lab work and all that with the health department, because they come to site visits. So we got to make sure all our ducks are in a row. And that's continuously every year. So things change per the health department. If they change or they recommend changes, we have to make those changes. And sometimes, of course, of funding or staffing, you might not be able to meet some of those, but then you have to work it out, basically. So I think funding is part of it, and then just the changes that come down through the health department, which comes through the CDC. So yeah.
I mean, in our case, we are a small CVO, so basically the buck starts and stops with me. I can make all the decisions about policy making. So making these big decisions were easy in our case, but I do have partners who have larger entities, larger bureaucracies, that getting a protocol approved just to be able to get the CLIA waiver approved can take months, right? So that's a challenge that you should be thinking about, how easy or hard might be the bureaucracy at your workplace. In our case specifically, we did get a lot of pushbacks from physicians. There was a lot of conversations about how syphilis testing is something that should be lab-based. It should be only if you have access to a doctor. But we don't have a clinic. We're just a CVO. So there was a lot of pushback, and I appreciated that pushback, although it challenged me because it allowed me to see the bigger picture, right, and establish the the right MOUs, like Dean was mentioning, et cetera, and having places close by to address the needs that I'm not going to be able to provide. Also, another challenge is identifying where and how these partners can support. We are a CVO that works Tuesdays to Saturdays until 9 p.m. Where am I going to link someone at 9 p.m. on a Saturday for a rapid syphilis test, right? So all those conversations, and we were able to find partners that went the extra mile with us and allow us to address those challenges.
Great, thanks. So it seems like that second linkage piece was definitely something that was a challenge that I think came across all three of the different sites. And like you said, building those strategic partnerships was one way that you were able to overcome those challenges. But what were some other ways that you were able to overcome the challenges that you just talked about? Some of the other challenges other than that linkage piece.
Yeah, so real quick, so in our case specifically, we had the luck to have this clinical partner that is not even too much away from us, and the director over there and I had a good relationship. And what we ended up doing is that a lot of this training and retraining that needed to happen around the rapid syphilis test, temperatures, etc., also included their physicians. So my colleague, the director over there, have physicians of them sit on my space in my CVO, take the same training that my testers were taking. And that allowed us to have a similar vocabulary, because at the end of the day, I'm shifting a person from my space to their space. And if we're not talking the same language and they don't understand the technology that I'm using, there are more chances for issues. So definitely meeting together and these partners being very, very assertive on who they are and working together, not as silos, but getting a lot of this training and retraining together.
With us, and I'm glad you mentioned silos. Yes, we do work in silos in particular agencies. So you got to get staff buy-in. The housing staff, that they don't want to do it sometimes, or they might not be knowledgeable. So here we recommend, and over these last few years, we recommended that all staff go through all the health department trainings that are offered, so they can be knowledgeable. So if a client does come in, or a partner of one of the housing clients needs to be tested, they can have that open conversation. So yeah, it was a challenge initially, but we've been working with getting all our staff trained for all services here at the agency.
I think, yeah, one challenge that I didn't touch on was just sort of like the new client experience and having clients have to navigate something they were not used to, and then staff sort of building competencies. So I think one important thing is to also remain humble with the people you're serving, and just say, like, this is a new program, we're starting these new services. I've never done this form before, just being really honest, and allowing people to know that this is new and we're evolving and we have all these checks and balances in place, but like there might be some hiccups. It might take longer than expected to get you those lab-based results because we haven't quite worked out our EMR talking to the lab or whatever issue there might be. So I think just being honest with your constituents and then with your partners and other departments that you might work with.
And I'll real quick to piggybacking on what Alison said, a challenge on how to solve it, because the experience gets also impacted by the amount of paperwork. Each new technology is a bunch of new paperwork that the staff needs to fill up. Yeah, we're laughing because we understand. So also thinking outside of the box on how to streamline that process, right? Making sure that, hey, a lot of these things might be repetitive. Just ask it once in one general intake, or make those changes. In our case, for example, it was getting a little bit convoluted. So we redesigned oral tools for them to be kind of booklets in a big 11 by 17 sheet. And that way you could fold it into a booklet, and that allows to collect so much more information. We have having separate pieces, we're stapling them, etc., and it makes it more streamlined for us and for the client. Because yeah, there's more documentation that you need to collect now.
Yeah, and I think that helps transition us into the next topic that we're going to talk about, is thinking about kind of when you're in that pre-implementation stage, like what are some of the things that you can do to help these challenges from happening. So one of the things that something that you just talked about, Gustavo, was kind of creating that one general intake form. So rather than 5 different intake forms, depending on the test, we just have that one intake form that we use. And that's something that we can think of doing in kind of pre-implementation before we roll out these new tests. So what are some other things that you could think of that we could use in pre-implementation?
One thing we've done is have staff go through the services themselves. So staff who are eligible or appropriate for whatever testing or grants, provided those who are open with sharing that information to go ahead and experience the services firsthand. That also gives them they're better at recruiting people. And then also utilizing community advisory boards to do the same thing. So someone who's not even internal to the organization, but adjacent to the programs and supportive of the programs, who will give that honest feedback and advocate for communities served around like how well a service was delivered or how we could improve. So I think that is like doing dry runs, role play. People hate to role play, so then just do the whole thing. And it's not a role play; it's a role play. But do the services. And try and work out hiccups. And I know one thing we haven't touched on really is with our lab-based testing, we're using our agency's EMR. And so that is like a whole extra layer of complexity of like sort of the medicalization of HIV prevention that we're experiencing like right now. And I'm learning new things all the time about health records, but it's been instrumental in sort of communication to people's providers when they do get on PrEP, or if they do have an HIV infection, they can kind of see that they came through prevention's doors initially to access services. So I went on a little bit of a tangent, sorry, but role playing, it's a good idea, going through the services.
I mean, first and foremost, ask. Someone around you in another CBO probably is doing the same. Start asking, where are you? I think that's it's all about collaboration. So if you're in the pre-implementation phase, definitely ask around, see who else has done something. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Many times we're working for the same purpose. So do that. Also on what Alison was saying, I follow that role play is not always the best, but definitely I do insist role play a lot, practice the dry runs. But something that I like to do as well is the forms, once they have been edited and we have kind of a final style, I give them to each of the staff for them to take home, for them to fill it themselves with their own information. Not as a role play, but I type my name. It's confidential. I don't need to see it, but that way it clicks in their head. Why am I asking this, and where am I asking it, and how I can connect the big picture with the other. And that's something that I found that in role plays, we don't necessarily have the time to get. So that first step, take it to your home, fill the paperwork as you reply for your own questions. When was the last time that you got an HIV test, and check it off? When was the last time, and check it off, and do that, and then destroy it. I don't need to see it, but at least play with it.
I agree. Ask. Utilize your resources. I still to today will call somebody if I don't know, or ask them how they're doing it. And there could be other ASOs, providers. Be calling the health department a lot with our contract monitor and ask them, if I have an issue or question about something. So yes, reach out to people. That you will get the information that you want. But also when you attend these conferences, go to these sessions. I mean, when I went to USC a few years ago and they had sessions on PrEP, I brought that information back to our office and we began PrEP the next year. So yeah, get out there and attend these conferences, communicate with people. That's basically what you have to do.
And as a last resource, Google is your friend. Google stuff.
Correct.
Great. Thank you so much for that. So now let's shift the conversation over to successes. So what successes have you experienced when integrating your testing programs?
Well, with us, we have people have trusted our program. Not only, we shifted some of our programs. We have a specific men's clinic on Tuesday nights, so men can know they can come here and get tested for HIV and STDs. And it's been going around for years now. And, this is the place they know they can go on Tuesday night. But trusted that, they can feel safe and have confidential information safe here. I think that's one of our successes that we have here. Even though we're hidden away, some, a low place in the corner, people still know where to go, or they make referrals. A lot of our new clients coming in, they spoke to a friend that has been through our services, and they know that the service that we provide is utmost, one of the stronger programs here in the city. So those are the biggest things. With STDs, recently we began for years we've been doing HIV, we've been doing chlamydia and gonorrhea through urine, of course syphilis and Hep C, but 2-3 years ago we started with the swab, the oral and the rectal. And since we've been doing that, we've been, of course, finding a lot of positives. But, that has, I guess, gave people, the thought that, hey, I still need to get screened other places than just with the urine. So to me, that's one of our successes, implementing the oral and the rectal swabs.
But I would say its success is definitely, first and foremost, we have been identifying between 2 and 3 new syphilis infections per month. That speaks a lot about the need that was out there, especially to the community that we serve. So being able to have that level of reactive and connecting them to service is something that I do definitely count as a success. A huge success for me as well, there has been more traffic flow. There has been more people interested in talking about other things that are just not HIV, and they kind of see us in a new light. But honestly, for me, a success staff-wise and client-wise, a lot of the conversations have shifted. They have shifted into more sex-positive conversations, because now it's not just about HIV and all the stigma that is still attached to HIV. There are a lot of other conversations. It's a lot more easy for some staff to relate, the young staff, to relate when I'm on PrEP. I don't necessarily think about HIV, but I do think about syphilis. Or I do think about Hep C, and it has helped, at least I've seen, shift the conversations in this space.
One thing we've done with our STI testing and linkage to treatment that focuses on gay, bisexual, or other identifying men who have sex with men, and trans or gender nonconforming folks through one of our grants is that we have been sort of the entryway for a lot of folks from those communities to get access to PrEP. And we've worked to create a program where we will provide those initial PrEP labs. So we do a few additional tests like hepatitis B screening, a comprehensive metabolic panel for clients who are going to get on PrEP with our agency at no cost, because the grant can cover them. And then we put a little bit of agency funds into providing the comprehensive metabolic panel. And then people are accessing PrEP with very few financial barriers in the way, because once they do see the provider, they're either using insurance, Medicaid covers PrEP in Louisiana, or working with patient assistance programs to cover the cost of medication. So we've really tried to eliminate those financial barriers to PrEP. But additionally, through providing those screenings, there have been several, I think it was 7, and this is out of several hundred, but 7 who assumed they were healthy younger men identified some chronic illnesses because they were getting medical care. And a lot of times young people, especially who feel good, don't seek out medical care. So by having not just HIV testing, but STI testing, we've linked someone to PrEP. We've also linked them to a primary care or a specialty provider that, like, I don't know that they ever would have done that until much further down the road when there were further health complications. So it's a real win on how having more of what someone needs in that moment can really open the door for healthcare.
Yeah. And I agree with Gustavo that the conversation has changed. We find a lot of our clients coming in and mentioning, I'm starting a new relationship, and through conversations that we have during our testing and post-test counseling, knowing your partner status. So yeah, they get in relationships, they bring their partners in to get tested once they begin new relationships. So those conversations are shifting drastically.
Yeah. It's on emails. It depends also on your structure. We have a few programs that are deliverable based. So we perform and then we're able to bill, quote unquote. It's through grants, but we're able to submit that. Automatically, I have 3 new referral sources that I'm able to bill. It helps sustain my programs. It helps them make more varied. And that also speaks to the admin part of the importance of having additional services.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking back to that pre-implementation phase that we talked about a little bit ago. What can be done in pre-implementation to ensure that programs have some of the successes that y'all just shared?
I piggyback on what Alison put. I think we need to, as service providers, we need to never forget that we can also, and many times our clients. So going through that experience, sitting down, not as the admin, not as a director. Oh, I need to collect all this data because I need to collect it. No. How does it feel to be sitting in half an hour collecting this data? And having honest conversations about that and breaking it down, being flexible to shift the process in your space to allow then this space to catch this little potential breaking points and fix them before they happen.
Mm-hmm.
So we've talked quite a bit about what all of your integrated programs look like, the successes, a little bit of the challenges, but what have you found, or have you found to see like that makes these integrated services much different from just HIV testing on its own?
Good question.
Let me think. So it makes them more what? Sorry, Sina?
What makes it this different than just having an HIV test? So having these integrated
different
options for clients as they come through the door.
Gotcha.
I mean, having options is client-centered, right? So if you can offer someone more, it lets people have more agency over their health, sort of what they see as a priority. We're generally required to have an HIV test as part of a visit, but having people feel like, or allowing that client to sort of feel like they're choosing those tests that are most appropriate for them, or helping us guide them to what tests are appropriate, I think makes them feel, like Gustavo said, it's like whole health, it's more holistic. So I'm not just looking for HIV, because that feels really stigmatizing, or like you're calling someone out. But we're just, you know, these are things that can happen as a result of being a sexual human being. And it turns out most of us are in fact sexual human beings. So let's offer you as many things on checking up on that as possible. And it just, I mean, I think it's really nice to be able to offer all of those things to folks.
I think it's important, you know, with our housing clients, which, you know, people living with HIV, you know, they feel that, you know, they can feel that they can come, you know, come to their housing appointment, but also, you know, say I might need an HIV test. And, you know, specifically, they may go to their HIV medical provider, but they're not going to do the anal swab or the oral swab. They'll get, you know, again, get a urine sample, but here at our clinic, they can get, you know, the oral and the anal, the urine, the hepatitis C, and the syphilis, all in one particular day. Come see the housing case manager, do the STD screening as well. Again, with our behavioral health program, you know, we've had a client that, you know, was speaking to our counselor, and, you know, identified that he had some issues with, you know, sex. So, you know, one of the things was, you know, they made the referral to us for STD screening. So, yeah, all of those services integrated and allowing that client to be able to access those services is very important.
Yeah, I concur, and definitely it makes it more, like Alison said, it is more. You have more options, so that's great. But it speaks back once again, personally, to the shift that I see in the counseling, right? Depending on the community that you work with, certain behaviors that we do on a daily basis are not talked about. Anal sex, different positions. So talking then about these other options that might not exclusively require an anal conversation or anal sex, right? Starts opening the conversation with the individuals. Also, it allows, honestly, for me to have a more holistic, honest conversation. Stuff happens, and yes, sex is meant to be enjoyed. sex is not meant to do it and then the next day be worried, right? But in able to be, for you to be enjoyable, you need to have the information, and this is where you're going to get it, right? So let's talk about much more than just HIV.
We've had a lot of folks report that while they have access to HIV testing through a primary care provider or some of these STI testing, that they're just not comfortable telling their GP that they have anal sex. There's a lot of people who aren't. I mean, I live in Louisiana, so stigma and homophobia is real and pervasive, and there are people who aren't out to their providers because we have providers who don't ask people about sex. And I think that, I mean, there's a lot that can be done just with like medical school in general around taking sexual history of everyone in a really non-judgmental way, because you can't, if you're not addressing sexuality as a provider, you're missing opportunities to address health. But we are here in the meantime, as everyone else gets their act together, to provide those sort of non-judgmental whole health services. I just wish everyone else could be kind of more in that mindset.
Yeah, and not only people might have issue talking about with GP. Some, especially in the communities that I work, they won't even have an access to the GP, right? So if getting if there's HIV testing available everywhere, it's easy because it's funded, and we include other STI testing, they will have access to that as well. And I think CVOs and or clinics that have a component like Dean and Alison, we speak a lot to different people, right? And the way that we speak is different, and our testing shifted in a way that it's not only about HIV. For example, hey, when I'm doing a test, I have time, because it takes longer now, more tests. I have time to talk with you. How's your family back in Venezuela? How is your family after the hurricane in Puerto Rico? And all these things, my hair stand, all these things connect in a different place, and people move and shift to a different mindset, and allows you to have a more holistic experience overall.
Yeah, thank you for all that. Yeah, I definitely agree. It's definitely a more holistic approach to be able to provide all of these different tests, and allow the client to decide which ones are okay for them to take that time and which ones aren't, right?
Sorry, Sina, another thing I forget, because I work a lot with MSMs, right? And we mentioned it, but for example, we just got a new program for women. A lot of the Latina women do not have HIV as a priority. A lot of the trans women that we see do not have HIV as a priority. It's a third, fourth, fifth priority, but a syphilis test might be, or a Hep C test might be. And that allows us to connect them to a different place and provide the services that we know that they might need, but they are not necessarily connecting in their head about it.
I think even with the integration of, you were talking about women, pregnancy testing is, if a woman comes in for a pregnancy test, well, okay, if you had sex and you're concerned about being pregnant, then there's a list of other tests that, again, might be beneficial for you to take, right?
Yeah.
And so keeping on with that conversation around our communities and our priority populations, how has integrated testing allowed you to increase your reach with your priority population or the community that you serve?
We regularly exceed and exhaust our contracts for STI testing because there's such a need. I think we do a good job of retaining folks, so people do come to us with a needed frequency for STI testing, and we don't stop seeing people because we've spent down all the funds on a grant. But the program has grown and is continuing to grow because there's a need. So we're thrilled to have it, but it creates more work for us.
Ditto.
I see that.
No, go ahead.
I see that as a feedback loop. Once again, I'm a CVO. I don't have physicians here. A lot of our behavioral interventions do talk about STIs, but then I have to say, oh, sorry, I don't do it here. Let's do it there. So now I can provide a bigger picture for all of them to talk with me in that process, but also, for example, promotion-wise, our promotional social media, our material has shifted as well, right? Because when we're thinking on HIV, we always think about specific behaviors, specific needs, and when we start thinking about this bigger options, like Sina said, so now my promotions can highlight very big a pregnancy test or a syphilis test versus an HIV test, or overall sexual health instead of just HIV.
I agree with our highly targeted population. We of course implemented our men's clinic, and our highly targeted population is MSM, but our men's clinics for anybody. I mean, we don't refuse anybody, whether it's a woman or heterosexual man, but we targeted that because of that highly targeted population. Opening the men's clinic, when we do our promotions on social media and gay-specific sites, I always include STD screening and the specifics of the STD screenings. We add in the couples testing and PrEP in our promotion as well. So yes, it is very important to be able to reach to the community that you're targeting and let them know the services that you provide.
So for example, we are primarily a prevention-based entity. We do linkage, but for the most part, we see folks who are trying to prevent HIV or who are trying to link to another place, right? But then this discordant couples, persons who already are living with HIV and their partner is HIV negative, they hear about us and they can both get a Hep C test here, or they both can get as well as about their process as a couple, instead of, oh, my person are addressed and yours in this other clinic. And seeing them together sitting in the same waiting room, waiting for the same test, and then talking about it is something that I think is a great gain. It might not be something that's documentable. It might not be part of my objectives for the CDC, but when I am sitting and I see them in my reception area, that speaks a lot to what we're doing.
Same here.
So what kind of logistics are important when planning for the integration of hepatitis C and STI testing? I know we talked about a couple of logistics earlier. We talked about policies and procedures, funding, staff readiness. Is there anything else logistical that you can think of that would be important as folks are planning this integration of testing?
Well, when we moved to our new building, probably about 13 years ago, we were fortunate enough to have a lab here, set a room specifically for a lab. So that was very important. Yeah, I know some agencies probably can't do that. But, I guess as you move on, try to identify a space specifically just for a lab, because I've been to agencies where they test in their offices, So yeah, look for those spaces and plan for those spaces for specific lab work. And also, again, having a medical assistant or phlebotomist or something like that is very important. Again, work towards that if you can't afford it at this time. But even contract work, initially, again, we started off with just a contractor coming in on the evenings during our men's clinic. And, of course, now we're able to have a full-time medical assistant. So those are some of the key things that I noticed that kind of work well for us.
I think one thing, doing reverse site visits, so not just asking other agencies, but if there are folks that are doing very similar work, whether they're doing it through a grant or through funding, just watching the flow and taking pointers from people who have, Gustavo said, why reinvent the wheel? So someone's probably already doing something pretty similar. It could be with a different population or a slightly different setting, but people have worked out best practices. So stealing their intellectual knowledge their intellectual property.
Yeah, and definitely think about, I might be very passionate, I like to rush, but take your time with the process, right? And be very honest with yourself and your workplace about the boundaries and the limits. And Dean was mentioning it, right? I might have access to a physician right on my place. I might have a laboratory the next floor up. I might not have it. How is it going to look? How am I going to plan for the unforeseen? And I already know a lot about that, because if I've been doing HIV testing for a while, I already know where the breaking points might be. I just need to retweak it about this other testing that I'm going to be using and apply to that. So a lot of thinking and foreseeing, I think, is important.
Yeah, with us, we don't have a mobile unit, but we do testing outside of the office. So, have that checklist, make sure you have everything so you don't have to get to that location and have to call back to the office and bring this and bring that. So, we load up our van, and we make sure everything is on there, and we have to do what we have, So, you might think, oh, well, we need a mobile. If you can't afford it, you're not ready for it, don't do it. So use what you can. Make sure you just have everything in place, your procedures, your off-site protocols and things of that sort in place.
Yeah. And I think also adding on to what Alison was just saying about mapping that flow, map your ideal flow for what you think your program is going to look like once it's integrated. And like she said, don't reinvent the wheel. Map what you think your flow would look like, and then go and visit another site that's already doing it and watch how their flow works compared to the flow that you may have mapped out, and see where you may need to make some adjustments or changes based off what you learned from watching someone else's flow of how the integration works, right?
And when you identify those things, build a relationship. So, for example, like I said, I don't have a clinic. I'm not a clinician, but I do have one that's 2 blocks away, right? If I know that I'm going to be out on a Saturday, the first person that I call is my partner on a Friday, and let them know, hey, I'm going to be out on a Saturday. Out of the walk-in spaces that you have on Monday, could you hold 3 for me? In case I get in a reactive, I can just call you, send you an email, and that's the first person you're seeing on Monday. But that only happens through the relationship building, right? So work with them, see what's acceptable for both parties, or 3 parties, or 4 parties, and set it in place so that you have the tools and you are not like looking up the stars whenever things go differently.
Great, thanks. So now we're going to talk just a little bit about social media and kind of marketing this new integrated program as opposed to just HIV testing. So how has integrating your program been able to help you when it comes to marketing your testing program, or even social marketing using social media?
Exploiting the one-stop shop is wonderful. Letting people know, hey, come here and you can get all these other things. It's wonderful. Works magic. It also allows us to be seen as a more accessible place, and not just the place where you go to get an HIV test, right? So that opens, quote unquote, the market for a lot of other people that might have thought we were not the place for them.
Well,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, well, social media plays a big role, and just having your information out there and making sure it's updated anytime there are changes to your program, because that is a key. Word of mouth still for us is the primary way people are being recruited. So someone having a good experience is going to get other people through our door. Similarly, right, so someone who has a bad experience, you don't just lose that client, you lose that client and their peer network potentially. So word of mouth, building a reputation through direct client interaction still plays a huge role in these folks. You can't gain trust through Instagram, right? You can gain trust through having someone sit in your office, treating them with dignity and respect, and giving them the services they need.
Yeah, I agree. Social media has played an important part in our recruitment for our services, but also letting the community know where we are. From time to time, we hear that the clients will say that they didn't even know we was here. So yeah, we utilize social media, Facebook, some of the gay chat sites. We also use Instagram, of course, our website. But one of the questions that we do ask on our assessment is, how did you hear about us? And yes, they mentioned online, or they Googled HIV testing in the city. And if your services are not up on that website or through the CDC, then it's hard for people to know where you're at. So social media has played an important part. Yes, word of mouth from individuals that have been utilizing our services over the years will spread the word to their friends and social networks that, PALS does offer services. PALS offers a men's clinic. PALS offers, you know, the ability to speak one-on-one with counselors during the sessions. And again, going back to what I said before, it's a trusted service. People trust that they will come in and get a quality service through our program. And once you find that it's out in the community, you know, you'll get more people, individuals coming in and individuals coming back, and of course, making referrals.
And I mean, I think social media sometimes is a struggle for a lot of entities. I don't know what to put on my Facebook. Well, you have 2 additional tests. You have 2 more subjects to put stuff on, to write more posts about it. So right out of the bat, you are forced to write more, or you have more options to talk about when you're getting the writer's block. So I'll talk about this then. And there's a lot of more data out there. So it helps in so many different ways at the same time.
And one thing that is worked with us, especially this year and a few years back, utilize your colleges for social media. We have an intern now that is at the University of South Carolina. She's either an intern or work study student, and social media is her thing. So she's doing a lot of our promotions, takes a little bit of heat off of me. But yeah, just utilize your colleges, internships, work study students, and things of that sort. Because they know it. You know, I'm old. I'm 52 years old. So somebody who's 18 to 20 can know a little bit more about social media and can do it a lot better than me.
I'm laughing because the struggle to get this technology to work for me was quite real. I needed a younger coworker to help me out. So college students are great.
Yes, agreed. So we're coming up on the end of our hour-long chat. So we have one last question. So what is one final takeaway point on the integration of testing that you want our viewers to leave this conversation with?
I think if you have the tests, they will come. So you will see new clients and new folks if you have more to offer. So it's a worthwhile investment.
I mean, I would say, without trying to sound like a cliche, just do it. Just do it. It's easier than what you might feel it is. It's so much more worth it. You will definitely take much more than what you're giving, honestly, from all the different experiences. So just do it, ask around. It's 2019. There's no reason to not be doing all these different integrated strategies.
Yes. Make it a one-stop shop. You know, initially we were just doing HIV, had to send them to the health department for STDs. No, you will lose people in that way. You really would lose people. So just do it again.
and if you're from a clinic seeing this, reach out to CBOs, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can get so much more clients just by this as well. And I might not have all the permits, but you do. So let's collaborate. As a quick example, so for example, back in Puerto Rico, the Department of Health gave me the earring cups and everything. We would collect it and they would process it. That alone allowed them to see so much more people that they would have never been seen. So if you're a clinic or a place who has a lab and you see this, reach out. You both can win so much from this.
Great. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise with all of us, with me, and with everyone who's viewing live right now. So please remember to check back in on Monday for the second part of this webcast series. We'll have some additional panelists, and they'll be talking about that next piece that comes after testing, which is linkage to care. So thank you again. Thank you again to our panelists. Thank you to everyone for taking the time to view us, and we will talk to you on Monday.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Good afternoon.
Take care.
Bye, y'all.